All right, let's jump right in. The source material we're breaking down today basically argues that there are two totally different ways to understand the history of, well, of anything, from a single book to the entire cosmos. One way is to measure the physical stuff we see right now and try to work backward. The other way? It's to listen for a direct, unbroken signal sent from the very beginning. And that choice, as we're about to see, makes all the difference. And this slide is the perfect way to frame it. Imagine you find an old book. How do you figure out when it was made? Well, you could take a tiny sample of the ink to a lab, measure its chemical decay, and calculate an age. That's measuring the ink. Or you could just open the cover and read the copyright date the author printed right there. According to the source, these two methods can give you wildly different answers, and deciding which one to trust is everything. So to make this idea really clear, the source uses a great little story. On one side, you've got the inspector. He represents the scientific method of measuring the present to guess about the past. And on the other side, you have the architect, who is the creator, the one who actually knows the starting condition. Okay, so picture this. The inspector walks into a room, sees this gigantic pot of water, and dips in a thermometer. He observes that it's cooling at a steady rate, so he does the math, projects it backward in time, and declares with total confidence, this pot has been boiling for 10 million years. His entire conclusion is built on one single assumption, that the process he's watching now has always been the same. But here's the kicker. According to the source material, the inspector is completely wrong. The cook, the one who set the whole thing up, actually just put a pot of already boiling water on the stove 2 minutes ago. So the inspector's entire calculation, all that math, is what the source calls a syntax error. It's a fatal mistake because it completely ignores the actual initial conditions. And this really gets to the heart of the source's critique of what's called uniformitarianism. That's the big idea that the physical laws and rates we see today have always been constant. The source argues this can create a mirage, an illusion of deep history that looks totally real but is actually just a phantom, created by a faulty starting assumption. So what's the alternative? The source puts forward this really cool concept, functionally mature initialization. And the analogy here is just perfect. Think about a video game. When you press start, you don't begin with a single pixel and wait for mountains and rivers to evolve, right? Of course not. The world is already there, fully formed, ready for you to play. The argument is that our universe could have been born the same way, as a fully functioning adult, not as a baby. To really drive this point home, the source uses another great allegory. Imagine a tree that was created on day one already having 700 rings. Now, an inspector would come along, count the rings, and say, aha, this tree is 700 years old. But from the architect's perspective, those rings aren't a record of time. They're not birthdays. They are, as the quote says, structural bones. They are a necessary component for the tree to be able to stand on day one. They're a feature, not a history.
So, if we can't trust measuring the ink or counting the tree rings, how are we supposed to know the real age of things? The source proposes a completely different method. It talks about an unbreakable signal that it calls mesora, which it presents as the universe's official, sovereign copyright date.
So what exactly is this mesora? Well, according to the source, it's the chain of Jewish tradition. But, and this is a huge but, it's not presented as folklore or just some old stories. The argument is that it functions more like a meticulously preserved chain of custody. It's described as a high-fidelity system designed from the ground up to transmit a specific historical record, a record witnessed by millions without corruption across thousands of years. Now, this is where it gets really fascinating. The source frames this whole system using language from modern information theory. It starts with a mass witness event at Sinai. You could think of that as the Genesis block. Then, that information is secured on a distributed ledger, not on one server but across millions of families or nodes. The data integrity is maintained by incredibly strict protocols like scribes making bit-for-bit copies of texts. And the result of all this? An immutable signal, the year count. And this is it. This is the timestamp that this unbreakable signal is said to carry. It's not a calculation based on decay rates or cooling water. It's a specific number transmitted through this incredible human chain. According to the source, this is the universe's actual copyright date. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. What about the really obvious objections? How does this model of a functionally mature universe deal with things that seem to prove an immense age, like light from stars that are billions of light years away or radioactive decay? Well, according to the source, these aren't paradoxes at all. They're just features of a mature design. That's starlight from distant galaxies. It was created already in travel, on its way to us, just like the tree was created with rings. Those radioactive isotopes, they weren't meant to be a clock. They were functional parts of the system's metadata. And those faraway galaxies weren't born as little smudges of gas. They were placed fully formed, like jewels on a cloth. To put it beautifully, the source says it's a universe that woke up wearing a tuxedo. It was born ready to go.
And all this brings us right back to where we started, to the final audit. It's the ink versus the copyright date. We're now faced with that exact same choice, but we have a much deeper understanding of what each side represents. This isn't just about two different results. It's about choosing between two entirely different reference frames for what we even consider to be evidence in the first place.
And this table just lays it all out crystal clear. You have the chemist, whose method is to trust the physical decay of the ink, to extrapolate. And the result is a massive age. Then you have the author, whose method is to trust the copyright page, the transmitted signal. And the result is what's explicitly stated. The source argues that these are the two fundamental choices we face when we look out at the cosmos. So the source's final word on this is, well, it's pretty bold. It concludes that the prevailing 13.8 billion years story isn't a discovery, but a mathematical hallucination. It's what you get when you apply today's fixed rules to a primordial universe, where the rules themselves might have been totally different. It's like measuring the ink without realizing the author used a special, super fast-drying formula. And so, the source material leaves us with this final, powerful question. It's a challenge, really. A challenge to think about what we can measure versus what we can truly know, and to consider the profound limits of our own perspective when we try to audit the very beginning of time itself.